first of all, thank you very, very much, everybody, for coming today. This is a very different type of, conference for us as records managers to do, to sort of say, okay, let's go out and talk to the business en masse about how we help you change things. I think we've done an okay job of that. Yeah, I think we have. And I think from that, before I go out to the floor, I think I'd like to ask the panel a question. And this is to anybody who cares to answer, but after what we've heard today, what one thing do you think we could do to help the business? Panel. Oh dear. Heather.
I think it's to go and listen to what they need, and in that conversation discuss what we can deliver back to them. So it's completely got to be about what you need in your context, and it's not about records management.
Alan? I think I've been asked this question before. I was at the IRMS event in Dublin 2 or 3 weeks ago, and my knee-jerk flippant answer was frighten them. If you want to help them, frighten them into doing something that will actually trigger change. It was meant as a joke, in my defence. I think it's obviously more than that. It's listening to people, as Heather says, and trying to take people along with you in terms of what you want to do. And I think that's been the big theme of today for me. It's kind of what do people want, and how can we facilitate that as records and information managers to take the business where it needs to go, with us helping in that process. So.
Okay. Ren, I believe you were.
Yeah, it's really just the one, and echoing all of that. And I think on change, there's something that, for change to happen, you must first recognise there's something you have to change, that there is an issue, and create a sense of urgency, but then obviously bringing people with you. So totally agree there. The other thing I was just going to say is finding forums to share the beneficial outcomes. So when people transform effectively or leverage the use of data and information effectively, is to share that expertise and those analytical outcomes with others. And maybe I don't quite know what exists up here in terms of data observatories, but maybe that's something that should be looked at.
Okay, you.
I would make a plea for us in the information world to be able to explain clearly, more directly, what it is we do and how we can help the business. I think that was pointed out ably this morning by Alison when she said it's quite often difficult when we're asked the question, what do you do, to explain it. And I think if we can harness that, if we can explain to people in very simple, clear terms what we do and point out the benefits that we can bring to the business, then we'll be in a much stronger position as an organisation.
Claire?
Can I just build on what Hugh's just said and say it's about having different messages for different audiences and understanding that those messages need to be variable because the requirements of an organisation are very variable and complex as well.
Okay. Well, thank you. I really don't think, I've been in this game quite a long time now, and I really don't think what we should be doing has changed. It is genuinely about the right information with the right person at the right time and in the right format. But to do that, I think we need to talk more so that we know what you want, but you know what we can do. That would be my view. So, does anyone have a question? I hope somebody does, or it's going to be a long half hour. Right. Tim.
Here we go. Given the pace of transformation in all the organisations that are here, and simultaneously the size and inertia that IRMS systems represent, and therefore their lack of capability to transform and change, Do you think EDRMS is a dead-end technology? And if it is, what should we do instead?
Well,
Controversial.
hashtag controversial indeed from NRS there. Panel, is EDMS dead? And if so, what do we do instead of it? Heather.
I get in first before anyone talks so that I can actually say something that I'm not just repeating what everyone else has said. When we say it's dead, I think the problem about this is, so technology is developing. It started off way over there in something very different from what it is now, and it will continue to go apace. And in at that point, at that part, throughout it, the whole electronic document management system thing has evolved. And I don't think it necessarily didn't deliver. I think it wasn't technology that didn't deliver. There was lots of other reasons why that didn't deliver in organisations. Oh, great. Said something right, did he? Woohoo! So I don't think it's dead. I think it's evolving. And I think the really more important question is, so long as there's technology there, how do we make sure that we exploit it in ways that clearly we have failed to exploit it in the past, in some cases?
Reynolds.
And I think also, if you look at EDRM conceptually as a principle, especially that I have systems of record and I manage things in a structured way, rather than necessarily as a technology, it's certainly not dead, but the tools do need to evolve. We're all used to at home using Dropbox to sort of share photos or sync between the 8 or 9 different devices we use, and certainly I think that kind of file sync and share technology needs to come into content management type solutions to facilitate the user experience that we now actually have perhaps better at home than at work. And the other thing is it's not always just about one big super solution. This is why I come back to the principle. We have system or systems of record, but often they're horses for courses and best of breed. So, for example, in local government, managing democratic processes, etc., there are very special systems of meeting minutes and agendas, and you wouldn't necessarily want to sort of throw that out during a whole big corporate project. And then there's the whole balance between getting something right with certain types of tools for case records and other types of tools maybe for corporate records. So I think there's a bit of agility needed.
Alan.
I think I'd echo that. I think I'm long enough in the tooth to remember when every conference you went to was the kind of alphabety spaghetti of EDRM or whatever it might be. I think the mistake was, back then, not that long ago, but we thought one system would fix everything. That was the message we kept getting. This is the way to impose kind of structure and the things that we were familiar with as information and records managers on our organisations' digital assets and information. That one-size-fits-all thing perhaps is where it fell down. Perhaps we needed to be a bit more nuanced in appreciating where the information was, where the records had gone, that there was a difference between a line of business database system and our email, for instance. And I think that's maybe where the evolution of it is. It's picking the right tool for the right job and trying to understand what people want from it, rather than a sort of top-down imposition of this is what we think it should look like.
Thank you. Joe.
Yeah, I'd simply say, to sort of add to that EDRM, electronic document and records management, is not really a system, it's a process or a state of mind. So whether, as we said, it might be that you need a specific type of system for a specific type of record, and therefore you might have one or you might have a handful of systems, but it's seeing that as an enterprise-wide way of organising information. And it might be in the cloud or it might be in servers. It doesn't really matter so long as you control it and manage it, know where things are and have things in place to oversee that, so that you achieve the aims of saving time in terms of finding information and being able to document where everything is and what you're holding for how long, for why.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else? Hugh.
This isn't a view on the relative merits of EDRMS, I have to say. I'm saying this because there may be colleagues in the room who've been working for us for some time now on the Public Record Scotland Act and are building a plan around a particular IRMS system, and it's just a plea not to throw it out. Keep going.
Thank you. Can we ask this back at you then, Tim? What's your view on this?
Well, first of all, Hugh's right. If you're building a records management plan, use the technology you've got available to you, build it properly, think about what you're doing. But in a longer term position, when we look further out, we don't look at today, we look at the next 3 to 5 years, maybe a bit longer out. I think not only will the monolithic systems, but also the monolithic view will begin to be eroded. I think that's kind of what Alison was saying this morning. How quickly is that pyramid going to fall apart? How much longer can we continue to hold an organization together with a single hierarchical business classification scheme when the business transforms and the business is moving as quickly as it is? My view is that we're going to have to start thinking about looking at where the records are, just because they happen to be there, because that's just where we happen to have left them, and use smarter technology. Again, drawing on Alison's talk this morning, she talked about some of this artificial intelligence. I talk about machine learning. I'd start thinking about how we can learn where the record is from the shape of the emails that we're sending. Can we keep the records in the structures that make sense for us as a business that's very local and very specific? It might even just be my way of structuring my bit of data, and then somehow have systems interpret that, and then find that when people need it for governance, for all the things that we need. So my view is that it is disappearing. Its death knell is being sounded, but we aren't yet hearing it loudly enough.
Okay.
Sorry, I got that out of the way.
Thank you. I think where we are on this is I concur with everything that's been said. I think what we're trying to do as a profession is now help organisations to create content that can travel from system to system. I think in the past we've bought systems, or we've deployed systems or developed systems that the stuff is captured within it, either because of the file type or some sort of locking on it, and it's just difficult to get the stuff out when you move on to other systems. So I think we're moving more towards using standardized file formats and the such like, so that hopefully that problem will decrease. But yeah, I think it has a value for a while yet, I think, in reality. Okay, do we have a question, please?
Following on from, is the IRMS dead? What about our traditional records management tools? How do they need to adapt for the future?
That's a good question. I think there's two sides to that. I think there's what the business needs from us and what we... Anyway, panel. Lisa, do you?
So, out of interest, when you say traditional records management tool, an example being?
Well, Ralph?
Oh, well, no, I mean, I think business classification schemes are absolutely fantastic. they're great things to sort of overcome departmental silos, and I think particularly, you know, departments change, but the functions and activity of an organisation are much more stable. So a great thing to define, but then hang loads of other stuff off, so you can develop your retention schedule, for example, based on a business classification scheme. And what we're increasingly seeing, and I think it's absolutely fantastic that I'm seeing in Scotland, is the number of information asset registers being created. I think they're potentially a great option to sort an information asset register by. So to me, long live business classification schemes.
Alan?
I don't think they're going away for all the good reasons that Ronald just gave. I think understanding the organisations functionally retains value. I think there's still a kind of there's a good reason for doing that. And actually, in terms of being information professionals, it makes us more responsive to what the business needs. If we understand the functions and activities of the organisation, then we can respond more ably, more nimbly to what our businesses want from us. What I think might change is how we apply them, and this kind of speaks to Tim's point in the earlier question. It might be that we look at these functional areas. They always were quite high level, but they become increasingly high level, and then how people do things or organisational units do things underneath that, we become less concerned about, as long as we can see some sort of mapping to the functional areas. And this is a very poorly thought out answer, but I wonder if that's kind of where the evolution of it will be. I don't think we can stop understanding how our organisations work, because if we stop understanding how our organisations work, we become pointless, we become ephemeral, to use a good records management word.
You?
I would agree with what our colleagues have said here. I mean, we've worked very closely with a whole load of public authorities over the past couple of years now on their records management plans under the Public Records Act, and the one thing which has driven, I think, positive change and developments within many public authorities is the need to engage under their plan with a business classification scheme. I don't really have a view on where they might go in the future when we are in that records management nirvana and we're absolutely brilliant at everything. But for the minute, I think business classification schemes are a very, very good practical way of encouraging authorities to engage and think intelligently about what they do and how they do it, and where the information assets are underneath that structure. So I would be a big fan of keeping them for the time being.
Yeah.
Can I just say, I think one of the problems is not so much the tools we use, but the fact that, at least up until fairly recently, we kind of have to get the users to understand the tools, and why would they and why do they need to? And I think that's one of the problems. It's how they're applied. We need to know about them, we use them. To my mind, it's just more metadata gets associated with the stuff that we're looking after. So it's making sure that when we are using those tools, when we engage with users, we do it in ways that they understand, rather than trying to get them to understand what the heck we're on about, basically.
Just wanted to add, I think that's a really fair point. One of the examples I've used in kind of training slides over the years is I wouldn't take the records continuum and show it to finance. if I was trying to explain why it was important that they manage the records better. I think it's important I know about it, and I think it's important that a lot of the people in this room know about it and can probably explain it far better than I can. I wouldn't necessarily use it if I was trying to make a case to the Director of Finance about how long we should keep their invoices.
Happy? Can we have the next question, please? Please. Oh, microphone.
Hi, Mike. I was just wondering if the panel had some practical tips. In the session this morning, we covered the people aspect, and two of the things that came out were getting user engagement and getting leadership engagement. So I was wondering if any of the panel members had some practical tips on how you can get senior management engaged and how you get the users creatively involved in solving the problem, whatever the problem might be.
Okay. I'm going to have this answered in two ways, I think. I'm going to go to the panel, and then I'd like to come out to the floor and any senior managers would care to tell us what they think or what they think we should be doing the other way around, that would make it good, I think. So, but first, the panel. Hugh.
I would echo some of the things that we heard in a couple of the sessions this morning and again this afternoon, and I used it as an example myself in my own wee bit this afternoon, in that we need to have a compelling story. And it's easier for some of us to have a compelling story for others, but I think every organisation has a compelling story built into ours, obviously under the Public Records Act, is the mismanagement of information relating to vulnerable people for many years in Scotland. And that's a very compelling story. You've seen that being very effective in encouraging senior officers within public authorities to sit up and listen to what we're saying and actually get some feed and buy-in to that. So I think the compelling story thing is very useful. It's a very easy way to deliver a good message, but you need to be able to keep that compelling story fresh. You need to be able to regurgitate it at several points to make sure it doesn't go away. And that's the challenge, I think, is keeping it up there as a high priority. But compelling stories, I think, is a good way of doing it.
Joe.
I would just say a similar theme really about communication is find out what makes, for each kind of sector of your audience, find out what makes them tick. So for a senior management, it might be, how does this fit in with our wider strategy and things that we're doing at a high strategic level? But for individual users or groups or teams in a department, it might be, try and relate it to their day-to-day processes, really understand them, and get face-to-face communication with them as well, and then they can put a name to or face to your name, and it just feels a lot more like you're understanding their individual needs. So it's really getting segmenting really the different people who you're communicating with and understanding their individual particular circumstances and priorities.
David.
Everybody's just said it, so but it's the same thing. Communicate. Get your lift chat, your elevator chat down to a pat. Talk about it. Beat the records management drum at every opportunity. Gate crash meetings. I said in my session, I said I was catching people in the toilet. I wasn't. I was catching people in the cafe. But every opportunity, just talk about what you're trying to do and what you're trying to deliver for the business. Get the business to then tell you what would make it better for them.
Lisa.
I think regardless of whether we're talking about engagement at senior management level or any level in the organisation, what we really need is the information available to us to be able to articulate the benefit. And if we can articulate the benefit to the end user or the bigger picture, you're more likely to get that engagement and that buy-in. And I think that one of the reasons why we're having the conference today and we're talking about information as an asset is because most of the organisation's perception around the management of information is the compliance bit. And it's the punitive side of that. Oh, you'll be fined if you don't do that. And I think what we need to do is turn that on its head and actually make sure that we focus on information as the asset and exploit that asset so that we can articulate and ultimately reap the benefit.
Thank you. This is my boss. Alan, then David.
Frighten them, all of them. Joking aside, actually, I wanted to echo what Claire said earlier about finding what's the hook that's going to speak to whomever it is you're talking to, and it might be risk, or the avoidance of risk, or whatever it is, or might be some sort of process improvement. It might be the kind of recognition of information as an asset, as colleagues have just said. But it's what's the hook? What's this person concerned about? What's not working for them? Why are we talking with them? Where's the conversation? And as David says, whether it's in the toilet, the cafe, or even in the office, in that kind of in a radical setting, like kind of around a desk. Just actually talking to people and working out what's going to move them from where they are to where they want to be and how you can help with that. I think is the way to do it. But and that might, you know, I am joking, but it might be frightening. It might be explain the risk. It might be explain the benefit. It might be you know, put pound notes on it if you can. You know, every person has a different kind of need for whatever it is they're looking at in terms of process improvement, and it's where's that hook.
Reynold.
I was just going to say,
David,
after Lisa's point, we're out the other side of that. So I am having discussions, or senior management are having discussions with me about how do we protect our information, how do we look after the information, what can we do with the information. So I've kind of gone through that 18 months of pain of doing the whole compliance, and now they're coming back to me saying, right, we know we're about compliance, but what else can we do? How can we take this further?
Thank you. Reynold.
I was going to say one specific thing in the near term is the new EU General Data Protection Regulation, because that has the force of law. It will just come in place. To my understanding, it doesn't need the new, you know, an updated Data Protection Act legislation within the UK. And there's a lot of stuff in there. There's bigger risks in terms of bigger penalties, but there's an awful lot of things that organisations must do in terms of privacy by design, preparing for data portability, and things like that. You know, there's no longer the requirement to pay money for a subject access request, so theoretically the number of those might increase, etc., etc. And there's an awful lot under the hood of that legislation. So in one way it's a stick to wave to say legislative is a bit of statutory work we've got to will obligate us, but equally it's a great Trojan horse because there's so much work that can be brought in on the back of it, so many achievements that can be made.
Back to Alan.
Just to add to that, I mean, those of us that are kind of old and wizened in the room, you know, we've surfed this various bits of these compliance waves as they come along. You know, the Second Data Protection Act, then FOI, you know, then PRSA in Scotland. Now the EU General Directive's coming. It is helpful, but the only note of caution I would sound with that is it ebbs. It becomes normal. It becomes routine, and it's kind of been my job today to talk a bit about compliance in the session I did, which is why I'd mentioned this. But I do think all those other things that everyone else has mentioned are important too. So.
Okay, before I venture to ask if there are other managers alongside Lisa who would care to drop us a hint or two, I have some experience in this from my previous post and this post. In my previous post, I was information and records lead on the change programme for the Isle of Man government for 3 years. And there, the trigger was very simply, there's money at the end of the day. They'd had the budget radically reduced by a change in a taxation agreement with the UK, and they had to save money. It was all about the money, and it was about not doing unpopular things, because Isle of Man has a parliament with 24 members. It had 80,000 people, so the constituencies are quite small. So if you move a bus stop, you could lose your seat. So they were very, very sensitive about stuff when doing change. I came to Perth and Kinross, and we set about doing the records management plan for the PRSA. Myself and Donald Henderson in the audience there, under Lisa's predecessor, Ian, who'd been council lawyer for a long time. And I went to him and I said, "Oh, it's easy. We just say, you know, it's a compliance issue." "No, that won't light their fires." "Oh, okay. They'll take note of it, but it won't light their fires." "Okay. About money?" "No, not really. They never get given a proposal that doesn't say it's going to save money, so you can't really tell them that one." I went, oh, what about scaring them?" Scare them with the election thing." And he goes, no. And I was musing then and just chatting. He says, "Well, it does other things." And I happened to mention decision making, and he went, And that takes us to the chief exec's talk this morning, where she spoke about information and data informing decision making in the council. That was the trigger. That's the trigger here. That's the one that works in Perth and Kinross. So organisations do have the thing that makes their ears prick up. But it changes from organisation to organisation, I think. Within an overall landscape of everybody looking to do compliance and everybody looking to save money. It is an ask, and if there are no takers, that's fine, but would any other managers care to share their thoughts on how the records managers can help or engage with them? Okay, that's cool. We said all along about today that it was about starting thought processes and starting conversations. So that's good. That's good. Well, look, do we have another question from the floor?
Not a question so much as actually coming in a little later to your invitation there.
Oh.
In terms of, I'm the Chief Governance Officer at Falkirk Council, and we've just been given information management. I think there's a real question of everybody saying, yeah, but what is it? And having been given it and do that, we're very keen to be designing it in a way that will assist ourselves and the entire council. And I think in that sense, really a few of the comments that have been made absolutely resonate. You know, carrots and sticks work well together. Fear is a great motivator. It's a great destroyer of inertia. It gets you moving, but it doesn't get you moving very far or very fast. The fear might get you off your backside, but it's not going to get you running. And the carrot is what's really needed there, the vision and the excitement, and selling it as something that makes a huge difference. Going back to what Bernadette said this morning, and that was very powerful in terms of the value that she saw, in terms of just having that info that we've got at our fingertips, that we all in our organisations have, but actually to harness it, to be able to share it, to know the value that it's got, and to make a difference with that value. I think there's a real potential and a value to move forward in that, and it is being able to press people's buttons and being able to recognise that you want to avoid compliance issues, obviously, but you also want to recognise the goal that you've got and the goal that's there, and nobody in this room doesn't recognise that in that sense, but getting that message out more broadly and taking that back into my broader management team in the council. It is about exciting them and inspiring with the resource that we've talked a lot about resources, and we know that it's an awful lot more than just money, and that this information resource that we have to go back and use can transform the way that we do our business and can ultimately save money, but can make a difference to our communities, and being able to understand, recognise, know our communities, and assist that in planning the solutions for the real problems that exist in our communities, I think is a fantastic aspiration and potential for the proper use of information. So certainly that's the sort of vision I'm trying to go back with, and it's been really useful to hear a lot of what you've had to say about that today.
Thank you. Do we have a next question, please? Okay, we're drawing towards the end of the panel session. We have no more questions from the floor. It's kind of traditional here for the panel chair to have a final question for the panel. I kind of used them earlier, so I'm going to invite one of the panel to ask a final question of the panel, please.
I've got two questions. You can make a choice. Either, how do we sort out email?
I was thinking of that.
Or should data analytics and information science become as important part of an information manager's role as the more traditional governance and records management aspects?
Okay, what do you want? Do you want email, or do you want that other thing? Other thing, okay. Tim? Is it? Oh. Well, well, please, phrase it so the panel can answer it.
Right, okay, right. So, all good colleagues in this room who are involved in information management, obviously there are aspects of information governance and records management in their roles, but increasingly a lot of the conversations today have been around things like data analytics and information science. So, should it become de facto part of the information manager's job, and how do we get there? Sorry.
Alan.
Oh, and I'll have a go. On the basis that I've said something similar elsewhere before, possibly not in terms of the kind of job, but certainly in terms of the way we engage with colleagues who have expertise in these areas. I think the danger when you work in information is that you feel like you have to be, you have to have expertise in every aspect of information or knowledge management or records management or whatever it is that we're calling this. Actually, I think possibly there's the way things have developed over recent years is, yes, we need to be records and information managers. We need to know what we're good at, and we need to input that into the conversation with the experts from data analytics in the same way that we talk to people who are experts in information security or digital preservationists or whatever it may be. So we want that conversation, and we want to be able to speak that language and understand that and engage. And I'm not saying let's all be dinosaurs and put our heads in the sand. What I'm saying is kind of, well, let's be confident in what we're good at and what we know, and then use that to engage with others.
Heather?
The other thing about it is it's just fundamental, because once upon a time we had a filing cabinet and a file, and that's where the record was. And now the record is in little bits and bytes in 25 different systems in 15 different organisations, and in 25,000 filing cabinets, and in my email system. So actually it's really, it's the evolution of what we need to do as record keepers, and therefore also we need to engage with the ones who are providing. If you talked about my remember my picture earlier and the blood? So we're the blood of the information. We need to talk to people who, what's that about outside the blood stays in? The vein, the guy, so that's the technology stuff, you know. We need to be joining those bits up so that we have a whole thing. And I need to stop talking now, sorry.
No, keep going. Anybody else? Ali?
Just going to reiterate that point, I think our role is about joining up the dots, it's not about being the dots. And I think that's key. I think that's kind of what's coming across here.
I like that. Records management, joining up the dots. Okay, does anyone else on the panel wish to comment on that? Okay. In that case, that is the end of the panel session then. What happens now is Claire will come back over, and we have the iPad drop, and we have Tweet of the Day, which Joe and Ali will advise us of, and then Lisa will close the conference with her closing comments. So if I could ask you to give your thanks to the panel for the session, please.